Hello and welcome to the Scuttlebutt Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Briggs, and this show is all about learning from today's and history's greatest vets. Today I'm talking with Doug Spence. Doug is a naval flight officer and a big real estate investor, which is what we get into today. We talk single family home investing. He is a GP in an RV park investment syndication. And so we get into the ins and outs of that. And then we also have him break down a issue that I'm currently facing about whether I should rent my house out, sell it, and or what else I should do. And he gives me some advice on that. We also get into the very sophisticated conversation about why F-18s are better than helos and also the best bars in Pensacola. So stick around. You're going to learn a lot from Doug. As a reminder, you can find this episode as well as all other written content to keep learning, YouTube channel, and all other links and info that I put out with the newsletter at scuttlebuttpodcast.co. Enjoy this conversation with Doug Spence. You were just telling me that you are working on building this mastermind course. And usually there's a lot of like mixed feelings about when people put together courses. Like there's so many cringy courses on the internet. And knowing you and how well you know your stuff, I know that it won't be that. What is it that you are thinking about in terms of like how to provide the maximum amount of value in something like this when there are people that are going to be maybe turned off a little bit from the get-go?
Yeah, absolutely. And people should be turned off from a lot of products and courses and gurus that are out there. So I appreciate the skepticism. And I myself am extremely skeptical of a lot of this stuff. And I think because I originally went down the path of making the course. And then I realized that what I like about real estate is the people aspect of it. I like networking with people. I like helping people. I've spent in the last 2 years, over 80, 90 hours of my free time helping people for free with their portfolios. And I realized that's what I really enjoy about it. And if I just did the course, if it was just transactional with a course and I wasn't interacting with them, one, I wouldn't be able to help them out as much as I could. And two, I wouldn't enjoy it because I wouldn't be interacting with them. I realized that having a community, at least in the beginning, a very small community that aligned best with my strengths and what I'm good at. And I think it aligns well with helping out people as much as possible versus just like they're just consuming a course by themselves at a desk. Like having a community where they're interacting with me and with other people is so much more powerful, I think.
I agree. That's like what the foundation of feeling a part of something is. That's a feeling that is bred into us in the Navy or military in general. That's something that we know very well, the power of community. A buddy of mine who is in a peer group with me, and I have been actually trying to talk him into doing a course because he's thinking about trying to do like high level consulting or coaching. I'm like, man, why don't you just do a course? And he's, man, I just don't want to be a guru. I don't want to be that guy, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I've actually taken quite a few courses that are very high value. And I think that a lot of what this boils down to is like one, reputation is like a big part of it. If you have relationships with people and a proven track record already, that goes leaps and bounds like for the potential audience for this, which it sounds like you already have that. You've been doing the thing already. And I think that the cool thing about the course aspect is you're able to scale your time and efforts in a way that is more meaningful than like one-on-one. And then also the value you get by bringing people together in a community aspect as well.
Right. Yeah. And, a big catalyst for it was thankfully my wife, who um, she knows that I love getting on phone calls and just helping people however I can. And I spent a lot of time doing that. And once we had our son, she was like, hey, you can't just keep giving your time away for free to all these people because it's great that you enjoy helping someone with their portfolio for an hour, but that's an hour you're not spending with your son and me. And I was like, that's a really good point. Thanks to her urging, she's, hey, you need to you like it, you're good at it. Turn this into something where you're helping yourself and your family as well as other people. And I'm in 2 mastermind groups as well. And they said the same thing. So that's a big catalyst for it.
It sounds like our wives may have been sharing notes because my wife has said several similar things about, hey, I understand you're super extroverted and want to talk to random strangers on the internet, but remember, you have a small child and a wife that also need your attention.
Maybe they're in a mastermind that we don't know about together.
The wives mastermind that
Yeah.
probably would crush, actually.
Yes.
That's super funny. What are the things that you're planning to cover in the course? You have communicated to me that you look at real estate investing like there are a couple core pillars that come into that, and I think that's what you're hinging a lot of the course material on. Do you want to walk through what those are and give us a little bit of tidbit on each? No, we're going to dive it a little bit deeper into real estate here in a little bit, but yeah, give us the high level pillars there and a little bit on each.
Yeah, the idea is really I want to take everything I've learned in investing in real estate, specifically out of state real estate in the last 6 or 7 years, everything that I've learned, all the podcasts and books and people I've talked to, and basically distill all of that into a mastermind group and a course, with courseware within the mastermind group to help people determine what they should be doing. You start with your vision and your goals. Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? So if you don't know where you want to be, how can you chart a course to get there? So you start with that, and then you're working into what market you should be investing in. Once you know the market, then you're putting a team together, then you're figuring out how to fund the deals, then you're figuring out how to do the rehab, the due diligence and all of that, and then follow on management. So those are really the high level pillars of out of state investing that I plan to go deep into.
Why don't you walk me through each of those from like your perspective? Obviously, they're going to be different for everybody and establishing the goals and like maybe what you're good at or market you want to target, etc. Walk me through each of them, but from your own personal perspective. Like, when you got started investing, and we're going to rewind the clock here to that here in just a second, but like when you got started, what was it that you were after? Are you also after the same thing today? And then maybe how your approach has changed, which is obviously going to be informing how this course gets put together. You've got the experience to walk somebody through it.
Yeah, I wish I had a good vision when I started. So really, my in the beginning, it was just I got sold on the idea of assets from Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then led me to Bigger Pockets, and then I got hooked on real estate from there. And the first property that I purchased in Pensacola, Florida, my the extent of my rental analysis was just, I'm renting a home for 1,500 a month. There's a home in the neighborhood that's bigger and newer, and my mortgage payment would be 1,100 a month. And then that was pretty much it. That was the extent of my analysis. And I knew that I could rent it for around at least 1,500 a month because that's what I was renting a home for. So the plan was to buy it. And then whenever I moved away from Pensacola to my next duty station, then rent it out. And even though it was very crude analysis, because my real estate knowledge was limited at the time, it was sound analysis. But I didn't have that vision, that goal. I didn't write down where I wanted to be 5, 10 years from now. And if I had, maybe I would have taken different steps. I probably would have done a bit more researching into what strategy was best for me at the time rather than what was just convenient in my neighborhood. But it worked out. So yeah, at least right now, my long-term vision is 10 years from now, I won't be in the Navy anymore. And I want to be able to have the time freedom to do what I want to do and not have to work a W-2. So the goal is whenever I'm done with the Navy, I don't want to have a W-2 anymore. I want to be able to support my wife and my son and any future children that we may have using income from real estate and business. And I've gone more in depth in documents on what our day, I recommend folks go super in depth, like 10 years from now, what does your day look like? Where are you? What are you eating? How are you spending your time? Who are you with? Everything. Be as detailed as possible. The more detailed you are, the more likely it is that will come true in the future. And then by getting clear on your goals, the strategy reveals itself because there's so many different ways to make money in real estate: active, passive, out of state, local. And if you're clearer on where you want to be, those strategies will start to reveal themselves and you can start eliminating strategies that won't get you to that goal. That's why the idea of starting with the vision first and then the goals, I think is super important. I think too many people just go, oh, I'm going to buy a duplex in Cleveland because I heard about it on a podcast or because my buddy did it, but they don't think about what does that fit what they want or wholesaling or flipping or whatever. If your goal is to build long-term generational wealth, you don't really want to flip or wholesale, but people don't know that because they don't put that deep thought into it. So that would be the first thing is to go into that with folks and really dig into what they want and also chatting with their spouses. Because as Brock, whatever your wife's goals are, they're also your goals, whether you know that or not. Getting a spouse on board and talking with the spouse about what do they want their lives to look like. My wife is fantastic. And I wouldn't be able to do all the real estate stuff that I'm doing without her help and support. But we were chatting about goals last year and she had this goal of, oh, if we have a second child, I don't plan to work anymore at a certain point. And I was like, that's news to me. That I'm glad that we had this conversation because that's going to affect our income and expenses and all that stuff. But if we hadn't sat down and had that goal discussion together, I wouldn't have known that. So now I'm able to account for that. And, because it all trickles down from vision to goals to then actionable steps and all that. If that answers your question. That's like a high level of like where I want to be. So it's really just replacing our W-2. My wife is in the Navy as well. So replacing my W-2 income and her income with ideally passive real estate income so that we don't have to work. We don't have to work a W-2. We can focus on what we enjoy doing. We still will work, but we'll be doing things that we enjoy on our terms. So that's really the priority, is that time freedom of being able to do what we want on our own terms.
Was your wife difficult to convince of that? Was she, or is she kind of entrepreneurial geared that way? I know I talked to several people and have a lot of friends that have sat down to have that conversation with their spouse, and it's like that doesn't really compute, like not having a job that you go show up to, or maybe doesn't compute, or like it's hard to imagine what it's like to get money from something other than somebody else where you're the one behind the seat. So where
Yeah.
did she fall on that, and how difficult of a conversation was that?
I think it's especially tough for folks our age and older that grew up or were adults during the Great Recession, because a lot of people have a negative stigma towards real estate because of that. But yeah, she is on board. By the time we got married, I had already purchased maybe 3 or so properties and they were making money. And so I was like, I had solid data to support what I was doing. And so she was on board. She was like, seems like you know what you're doing. You like it. They make money. They're appreciating. That's fantastic. And so she's always been supportive of it. And she's always a great sounding board whenever I'm considering new things and all that. Yeah, she's been extremely supportive. And I feel for folks who want to get into business, entrepreneurial pursuits, real estate, whose spouses are not on board. That would be very frustrating. And I think the obstacle to overcome that is really just education, the individual building their education up so the spouse can see that they're serious about it. And then just educating, because a lot of people, they fear what they don't understand. They fear what they don't know. But a lot of people, especially in real estate or in the context of real estate, oh, my uncle had a house and he had tenants that destroyed the property. So thus, I don't like real estate. So there's a lot of anecdotal stuff that influences people's thoughts when it comes to real estate, a bad experience or a story about a bad experience. And of course, there's lots of those out there, but there are also ways to mitigate all of those things. So it just comes down to education.
One other question about something that you had said a few minutes ago. You were saying that all it takes to accomplish a goal is having it clearly articulated. What gives you the confidence to say that?
I think it's, if you have a clearly articulated goal, then the only thing in the way of someone not succeeding in that goal is quitting. And now there are exceptions, of course. If I'm like, I want to be the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the next 5 years. Like, all right, It's got to be realistic. It's got to be attainable, right? So there are some goals that we can't achieve, of course, but if it's a realistic goal and someone is serious about it, the only way they can not achieve it is by quitting. That's also like an Alex Hormozy concept. I love Alex Hormozy and his stuff, and he talks about that as well. Like he says it much more eloquently, but that's the idea of it is the only way that you can fail at something is to quit. And as long as you continue and never give up, then you're guaranteed to succeed eventually. So
You might be talking to one of the bigger Hormozy fanboys, so we could probably spend the next hour riffing on quotes from him. He's got a lot of, oh, there we go. Is that $100 million leads?
So that is Gym Launch Secrets that I'm about halfway through. And last week I finished $100 million offers for the second time this year.
There you go. His stuff is very bingeable, I think. Like it's really easy to get into his audiobook and just let him riff, and yeah, he's fantastic. He
Yes.
also, one of the things, like an expansion on one of the things that you just said there, is the whole point of the game being we're trying to advance our wealth, advance our income, or advance our career away from maybe a traditional W2, is just staying in it. The point of playing the game is to be in the game, and as long as you're in the game, you're winning. And I think that that's a little bit wazzy woozy at times, but I think that's generally right. And
Right.
as long as you're continuing to move forward on something, it's who's to say.
Yeah. And I don't want to disparage W-2 jobs either because I've had a W-2 job for the last 14 and a half years. I've been in the Navy and I plan to be in the Navy until I'm at 20. And I'm in mastermind groups with entrepreneurs who don't understand why I'm still have that job. They're like, oh, you can make so much more money if you're out of it. Yes, but the goal is not to make as much money as possible. The goal is have a strong sense of purpose and a strong sense of fulfillment. And if I can have that in my 9 to 5 as a naval officer, and I can build a real estate portfolio on the side that will support me beyond my Navy career, why not? To give me the time freedom to be able to do that. And it's not that I don't want to work, it's that I want to work on my terms, where I want, when I want, doing what I want to do. And also, there are a lot of tax advantages to not having a W 2 as well. So that's a big plus.
You're doing something that I never really heard people articulate before, but when you first get started in real estate, you're not going to be like, especially if you're, I mean, we're going to get into like your strategy and stuff, but it sounds like you're more optimizing for cash flow, like on a monthly basis. Like you're looking to replace your income, and at least at the 20-year mark, you're going to be wanting cash flow, whatever that looks like. At the very beginning of starting cash flow investing, you might be getting like a couple $100 a month, maybe. Like it's not very much. And so
That's pretty accurate.
it's very unrealistic for you to be like doing real estate full time with something like that. And that's where the benefit of having a W2, that even if like you're never going to get wealthy, like being in the military, like that's just a plain and simple fact. And like the 20-year retirement is a really great plan. It's going to give you a bunch of cash every month, but you're never going to, that probably won't be enough because you're going to have kids, you got other stuff. And I
It's not
think
life
that
changing money. Yeah.
it's not go to the beach, sit there and do nothing forever money, which a lot of people think it is,
Right.
especially like a lot of E5 and below. But you are doing something where it's like you're taking advantage of both. You've got the compounding of cash flow in real estate, and then you're also going to be getting the security of the 20-year pension plan and stacking those on top of each other. And it is a big deal to serve 20 or whatever, but it gives you 20 years to figure out the cash flow thing. And by the time that you get out, you'll be sitting very pretty.
Right. And for me, the biggest advantage of doing 20 years is not the monthly income, it's the healthcare because healthcare costs are ridiculous. That's one thing that people that are in the military that join when they're 18, 19, and they're like, oh, this sucks. I want to get out. They don't realize how much healthcare costs. And it's a huge perk, even though we could complain about military healthcare for hours and hours, but it's free. And if you do 20 years, it's free for you and your family and your dependent children until they're like 18 or whatever, college age. That's a huge, like the dollar value of that is likely potentially way more than the monthly income. That's a big plus for me as well.
Oh, big time. I was actually a slight tangent on healthcare here. It's very the cool thing to like trash on military healthcare, and that's like a very in comment and a very safe thing to say.
Yes.
When you get out, it's interesting because the quality of your care actually doesn't improve that much, but the hassle of dealing with insurance makes literally being given a new pair of socks and Motrin feel pretty damn good. Like,
Right.
you are spending hours and hours on the phone, like dealing with insurance and sorting out, oh, is this person in my network or not? If I'm hurt,
Ugh.
I just go to medical and everything is fine. Like, it's the
Yeah.
simplicity of that is well worth that. And there are times that I miss it because after several like insurance debacles, it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. The grass is always greener on the other side. That's for sure.
It really
Yeah.
is. I'd love to get a little just give me like a high level overview. You're a naval flight officer, you've been in for 14 years. Give me a brief rundown of kind of what gets you to today. And then let's talk some RV parks and
Mhm.
other interesting investments you've got going.
Yes. Originally from Houston, Texas, I went to Baylor University for undergrad. I joined the military not long after I graduated. I went to OCS in Newport, Rhode Island, and then went to flight school down in Pensacola, Florida for 2 years. Selected Super Hornets, went to Lemoore, California for the FRS or the RAG, as it's called, and then selected a Japan squadron. So spent 3 years out in Japan, did 3 carrier deployments, had an apartment in Tokyo the whole 3 years, which was fantastic. Moved to Pensacola and was a flight instructor there for 3 years, the T-45. Also met my wife in Pensacola. And then we moved out to San Diego in December of 2000. Went to SEAL Team 3 and was doing JTAC stuff with them, with Navy Special Warfare for 3.5 years. And then went to another aviation command, non-flying aviation command that does air operations on ships. And I've been there ever since. And I'll be going to a shore tour next summer, first shore tour in, gosh, 4.5 years. So that'll be nice. Yeah, that's how I got to where I am today. Been fortunate enough to be a VFA guy that has been living in San Diego for almost 5 years now, which is almost unheard of. Very fortunate to not have been in Lemoore for a majority of my career. So thankful for that.
That's a
And
covetous spot.
I feel for the Navy F-35 guys that are going to be in and gals that are going to be in Lemoore for their entire career. So I feel for them.
Yeah, definitely not the most optimal place. It's so funny because working in aviation, you think that there is like all this diversity in locations that you can be in. It's not great. And the platform, there's some variability with platform. Helos maybe have a little better optionality, but the VFA route is not looking pretty most of the time. So
Iwakuni, Lemoore, Virginia Beach. If you're in the platform, if you do a instructor tour, or you go to Fallon or something like that, you can. There
even
are little
worse.
ways to get out of there. There are little ways to get out, but I'm
So
thankful to be
two
in San Diego.
two quick side tangents we have to discuss. Why are F-18s better than helos? That's going to be an important question. And then best bar in Pensacola.
Well, the first one's easy. They're both easy. First one faster. Second one, Floribama.
Oh, okay. I knew we got along. Those are both good answers.
I basically
Floribama
grew up
is
at the Floribama. I spent most of flight school at the Floribama, so I'm very familiar with it.
lot of good memories. Did you ever go to the mullet toss that they have there?
I I never actually went to the mullet toss. I don't like sweating in massive crowds, just
Yeah.
generally speaking. And the mullet toss always seemed like it would be a crowd of sweaty people and just didn't really appeal to me. But I spent a lot of time when I was a student, we went to Floribama literally every weekend.
Yeah.
We lived 15 minutes away, so it was fantastic.
Lot of fun activities going on down there, and it just is a great place to hang out and party for, and that whole coastline is great. Pensacola, the city,
Yeah.
a little so-so on that, but that whole Gulf Shore area is just, it's fantastic. That blue water's hard to beat.
W Probably the most underrated beach in the country is Gulf Shores, Alabama, and Destin west to Gulf Shores, Alabama is fantastic.
I would definitely not mind owning a place in, like, towards the Destin area. We
Yeah.
went over there for 4th of July when I was in A school, and it was just, like, a little bit more touristy. Wouldn't wanna be in the city, but, like, just outside of it a little bit. That, like I said, that water is super hard to beat.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, what you do some single family home investing, it sounds mostly cash flow basis. Did you do any other kind of wholesale or anything else before you started branching out of the homes and into different investment vehicles?
Yeah, so I focused on residential for the first few years, and then being in different mastermind groups and getting connected to other folks and seeing what's possible inspired me to want to go bigger and start doing bigger stuff with teams of people. And so I had a goal to be a GP or a general partner on a larger commercial real estate syndication deal. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to be on one last year. It's a fund that buys RV parks, and the guys who started the company that started the fund are both naval aviators. So one is a Marine Osprey pilot, the other one is a Navy helo pilot. And I know the Navy helo pilot personally, and that's how I got involved with RV parks.
So, did you jump in as a limited partner before you made the GP jump?
I did it at the same time because
Oh,
I
okay.
I knew I wanted to. It's funny because I had said I was like, oh, I really like these guys. I want to whatever their next deal is, I want to invest in it as a limited partner passively. And then before they could release their next opportunity, they asked me to be on their next deal as a GP. And so I was like, I'm still going to invest as an LP because it's a solid deal and all that. But that was a surprise. And I've learned a lot through the process. We helped them with, I say we, my sister-in-law and I teamed up to help them with both acquisitions and investor relations and the capital raise as well. So it's been a great experience. We've learned a lot.
So, walk me through the origins of, hey, we have a thesis on RV parks. Where does that come from? What's the original? Give me the pitch for, let's say that you're sitting down with an investor. What was the pitch that you were giving them of, this is what we see as the opportunity, this is where we're going, this is what we can expect?
So RV parks are like mobile home parks 10 years ago. So mobile home parks are a highly sought after asset class right now for a lot of reasons, but they weren't 10 years ago. They were seen as like trailer parks, but now mobile home parks are like a highly sought after investment. And the folks at Climb Capital were doing mobile home parks and multifamily, and they saw it become a very crowded space, much more competitive. And then they also grew up doing RV trips with their families. And they were like, what about these RV parks? There aren't a lot of people going after them, but the numbers are really solid depending on the park. There's a lot of mom and pop owners that that aren't running it like a business. They've just owned it forever and they don't charge market rates and they don't make improvements and they don't have websites and like basic business stuff. So they saw an opportunity in that asset class and started buying parks. I think Climb Capital as a company has purchased 11 or 12 RV parks now. They started their own property management company solely focused on managing RV parks because that's another thing. That's another thing that keeps people out of RV parks is like management. It's not like multifamily where you can, or apartment complexes where you can just Google multifamily property management. RV park property management isn't really a thing. It's usually the owners are like living there and running it, or they hire someone to live there and run it. So they have a organic property management company to run it. And I think that's a big advantage that Climb Capital has. And the returns are solid. And I think it's something that a lot of the bigger money, like private equity, they're starting to realize that RV parks are a fantastic opportunity and they're starting to buy up portfolios of them. So the folks at Climb Capital got in on that a little bit early. So the idea is we're buying up RV parks in the Sun Belt, improving operations, making them more profitable, and then in a few years, sell off that portfolio to private equity or sell them off individually, depending on what is best for the fund. So that's the idea. It's a 506c syndication.
One of the things that you said, you were talking about mobile home parks, RV parks, like coming in and out of favor, or I guess coming into favor, or as the realization of that goes. Do things like that ever go out of favor? This is something that I hear a lot in real estate is this wasn't popular, multifamilies coming back in. You don't really hear about things coming out of favor. So, how do you think about different asset classes like that? Do they all ebb and flow on different timelines? Are they, or how tied are they to rates? Is it, hey, mobile home parks are in right now because cap rates are higher for those? And when interest rates are lower, like there's not as big of a need for that? Or what is driving those things in and out so much over I don't know if a capital cycle is the right word, but
Yeah. Yeah. An easy, I think a simple way to talk about that is really in the context, and this is outside of the context of RV parks, because RV parks are not housing. Mobile home parks are housing, apartment complexes are housing. But in reference to your question, I think it's easy to answer it in the form of affordability. So, as many people know, housing is becoming less and less affordable, especially since COVID. Home values have skyrocketed, rents have skyrocketed all over the country. Even areas that have had stagnant rents, stagnant appreciation for years have seen those numbers go way up. And so as people are less and less able to afford housing, a higher and higher percentage of their monthly income goes to their housing expense, whether it be a mortgage or rent, then affordable housing becomes there's a premium with it, right? So apartment complexes, mobile home parks, a lot of those, especially mobile home parks, are considered very recession resistant because if folks are living somewhere and they're downsizing, you can't really downsize any further than a mobile home park, right? So there's the idea that it is a recession resistant asset class. And then in the context of RV parks, I think what we've seen in the last few years, especially with COVID, is the teleworking has changed the way people work. I know people personally that sold their homes and they live out of their RVs permanently. They travel the country, they follow the good weather. And it's probably much more now, but I remember reading 6 months ago that there's over 1 million households, 1 million families that permanently live in RV parks. And I think it's just changed the way people want to live. They see Some people don't see owning houses as valuable as it was for like their parents' generation. They like the flexibility, they like the mobility. And so people value it. And then you also have baby boomers that are retiring. They have money. They want to see the country. And RV parks are a great way to do that.
one of the things that you said that you and your sister-in-law are like partnering up on is the acquisition process. Walk me through what you guys are contributing to the fund in that way and like any kind of problems that you guys have seen and maybe what you've learned.
So that's a good question. So up until about a year ago, we were sourcing leads for investment properties using text messaging and cold calling. And so we got away from it because more and more people were doing it, as you probably know, or anyone that owns a property knows, you get blasted with text messages all the time, and it's really annoying. And more people were doing it, and it was getting tougher and tougher to stay in compliance with what's the entity that controls that? Not the
FCC
FCC.
or
Yeah, whatever the telecom, whatever the federal entity is that controls that. And so we're like, okay, we're going to stop this. But before that, we had sourced a decent amount of off-market deals all around the country. And so when Climb Capital reached out to us, we were like, hey, this is one thing we can provide. Give us names and give us addresses, and we can reach out to these owners. And so we actually got one of the 5 RV parks that we own, we actually sourced from a text message that we sent to the owners. And that's one that we have in Arizona, near a couple of us, near the Grand Canyon. It's in northern Arizona. And so that was a big way that we provided value to the fund, was just using systems and people that we already had in place and sourcing. We hadn't really done much commercial real estate sourcing with it. It was more residential, but we were like, okay, it works as long as we have the data, and we did it and it actually worked. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, and it actually did. So that was fantastic.
What size of a list is that? If you're like reaching out to people cold for that, I'm not even really sure how many RV parks there would be in the country. I'm assuming that there's a lot, but there you guys are probably not the only people that are doing this. So,
Yeah, definitely not. There's definitely a lot more now that are doing it, but really the number of parks that fit our criteria, because we're buying in the Sun Belt, so from Arizona through South Carolina, basically, and as high as, or far north as Tennessee. But we're also looking for pads that are, or parks that are 100 pads or greater. Really, there's probably less than 1,500, 2,000 parks that even fit our criteria. It really didn't take too long to sort through all of those properties, because I had a team of VAs that were doing that for us, and they could reach out to 500 properties a day. It didn't take long to work through the entire list, but yeah, that was a way we were able to source off market leads, and we leveraged that system into commercial real estate in that capacity.
with such a narrow scope of like your, I guess we'll call it your addressable market, what does that look like for the continuation of the fund? If you work through all of them, or do you just put a pin in it and wait and like periodically once a month or once every couple months, like circle back and try to hit people again and say, hey, has anything changed? Or how do you continue to grow? Or if you, I don't know if you had reached like your upper threshold of what you were looking to acquire, but where does that, because that's a pretty small addressable market, at least in
Right.
comparison to residential.
A lot of it is, it's easier to talk about in the context of residential, but a lot of it is just building a relationship. And what this is wholesaling basically is trying to find off market deals. And the way that wholesalers do that is multiple touches. It takes 6 to 10 or more touches, they call them, before someone is willing to sell. So what these wholesalers do is they will do a combination of cold calling. They'll do direct mail, just like sending letters or postcards. They'll do SMS, so text messaging. They'll do ringless voicemail. They'll do Facebook ads. They'll do email. They'll do all kinds of stuff. And a lot of data is public, which is why homeowners, myself included, get blasted with this stuff all the time. And it's really annoying. So that's one reason I stopped doing it, because I was like, I don't really like doing this anymore. But that's what wholesalers do. And it's those multiple touches. They'll send a message, they'll send a postcard, they'll cold call, they'll do all these things for properties that are in their market that they want to purchase. And then it's just hitting it over and over so that you're top of mind if someone thinks, man, we need to get out of this house. Maybe they're getting divorced. Maybe there's a death in the family or whatever. We need to get cash for this house now. Oh, wait, that mailer. Where's that mailer that I threw in the trash 2 days ago? That those jerks said they'd pay cash for our house. So that's the idea, is being top of mind. But that is not, I never really did wholesale. It was really just to source our own deals. But yeah, that's how that works. But I'm out of that game now. I'd rather just use leverage a local real estate agent and find deals that have been on the market for a while and negotiate a good price. That's how I like doing it now. Or you can get off market deals through agents as well. So
When it comes to the in-house property manager that you guys have built around maintaining these parks to, I don't know if that's like a vertical integration piece of that. Is that been a deciding factor in the success of the fund? Like in having a dedicated group of people that know and understand these? I know that you said that there's not a lot of those that handle RV parks. And then I guess how you're investing over a super wide swath, like how are they managing each of those effectively from probably a location that's nowhere near a majority of your locations?
yeah, that's a good question. So Climb Capital is based out of Pensacola, Florida, and a lot of their RV parks are relatively close to Pensacola. And So that's how they got started, was doing that. And then it just got to where they had so many parks that it was like, it's cheaper and better for us to just hire our own people, right? And maybe they're traveling a little bit or they're establishing teams there. So one way we're attacking that is, one of the parks we have is in Alabama. It's right next to Gulf Shores, and it's in Foley, Alabama. So that's an hour from Pensacola, a little less than an hour from Pensacola. And then there's two parks up in the Nashville area. So you basically have the same group of people that are managing those two parks. And then there's another park in northern Alabama, still a few hours away from Pensacola. And then there's a full-time staff there that handles that. And then we were lucky in that the park that we purchased in Arizona, which is not close to Pensacola, obviously, that already had really strong property management. So we didn't have to figure that out. So we just kept that property management in place. Those individuals that likely lived on site and were doing it, they were doing a great job. So we just kept them in place and kept paying them for the property management. Doing vertically integrating, like you said, and like having this full-time staff rather than trying to find someone that lives nearby or lives there that maybe is good, maybe is not. Having those people that are, it's called altitude property management. So having people that are on board with altitude already, having those folks manage is a big advantage for the fund.
Have you had any like major horror stories since getting involved with this, and or maybe not even horror stories, but any like things that almost went really badly, or maybe something that did go really badly that kind of led to a big realization that kind of changed how you've done business?
No, honestly, I've been really fortunate. I haven't really had anything catastrophic happen. No natural disasters or anything like that, even though I do own multiple properties in Oklahoma and there's that one in Pensacola. There's certainly potential for, but that's why you have insurance, right? That's how you mitigate that. I've been fortunate that I haven't had any major issues. That I haven't had any major issues with tenants. I've actually had only one tenant miss a month of rent, and we started the eviction process and they just left. And so, I mean, I've really been fortunate, but some of that, some may say that's lucky. Some may say that's having the right people who are screening tenants the right way. And so there's some luck in that for sure. But there's some, I don't know, I don't want to say skill, having the right people in the right seats that has mitigated a lot of the potential downsides. So I'm sure there will be catastrophic stuff eventually, right? And I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But I've been thankful that I haven't had anything crazy happen just yet.
My wife and I are in a situation where we are getting ready to move in about 6 months, and in a spot where we're trying to determine what to do with the house, whether we hold on to a good interest rate and try and rent it out. Do we get a property manager involved if we do that, or try to do it ourselves long term? And then, or do we walk away with probably a about what we put into it plus all of our equity after a couple years of paying on the mortgage? Let's say that, let's entertain the thought of me and us renting out the house and like moving out of state, so we're not right down the road. What do you think are like the 4 or 5 things, the most important things that I should be thinking about? This is a little bit self-serving, but uh, it will be pertinent to anybody that is also in a similar position. Lots of active duty folks constantly on the move. So, what are those 4 to 5 most important things that we should be thinking about when trying to rent out a place?
It's a self-serving question that will benefit a lot of people, I hope so, or the answer to which, really good question. Also, really common question that comes up in the real estate world. You get a lot of accidental landlords, people that bought a house and then they're like, man, oh, I could rent this out to cover the mortgage. Okay. Especially in the military. You see a lot of that with the military. But where people go wrong is they either say, I don't want to pay a property manager, I'll manage it myself. And then they put bad tenants in there who cause damage to the property or don't pay. And then they come to the conclusion that they don't like real estate, right? So I would say and it's a really tough time to need to move, because what year did you buy that house?
So we bought the house in 2021.
So you have and you did a VA?
Yeah. So
So
three and
you've
a
got a
quarter,
2.5 or 3?
three and a quarter.
3.25. Okay. Really good interest rate. That's tough because interest rates now, even VA, are like over 6, maybe 5.25, 6. That's like really tough. So would you be, if you moved, do you know the rough price range of the house, like where you're moving to?
It's a lot more. Like it's considerable. Like the cost of living generally where we're moving is not that much higher, but housing went through, it was probably one of the hottest markets in the country in the
Austin,
last
Boise, Salt Lake?
Boise.
Yeah. Okay.
It's my hometown. Apparently, what I hear, our rents are getting crushed, and so we are also not beholden to buy if we don't want to. We are comfortable renting if we want to, so we're flexible. They're
Yeah.
also considering doing, like, the house hack thing. We wish we had maybe done that with this. There's a ton of multifamily that's there, and multifamily pencils a lot better in a place like that, especially with, prices where they are, but anyway, much higher, much more expensive,
Yes.
housing costs where we're going.
Boise. Yeah. Boise has seen an influx of Californians over the past few years, which has significantly impacted affordable how affording the housing is. And so you would need to sell your house most likely to free up your VA entitlement so that you can buy if you were to buy, right?
Not necessarily. My wife and I both have VA entitlement.
Oh, okay. And one of you has not used your VA entitlement.
Correct.
Then I would definitely hold the house where you are now because we may never see a 3.25 interest rate ever again in our lifetimes. That is possible. So I like that is hugely valuable having that. We have a 2.25 on our house in San Diego, and I'm like, I'm going to do my best to never ever sell this house. I would hang on to that, and I would use your VA entitlement ideally to find a house. I would get with one. You can try to assume another VA loan out in Boise and get a lower interest rate. So that is a strategy that you could do. It may take a lot of time to do that because there's not going to be a lot of assumable VA loan homes on the market there. And then in the context of your current home, I would hire a property manager. Where do you live now?
Norfolk.
Okay. Yeah. I know people that live there that know property managers. I can connect you with a few different property managers, but I would definitely, unless you are interested in managing yourself from across the country, I recommend just hiring someone else to do it because they will probably do a better job and they will screen the tenants very thoroughly and all that. And I can almost guarantee that you will build more wealth by holding on to that house than you will by selling it now or in the next 6 months.
It's interesting that you say that because a lot of people that I talk to say that self-managing, even from a distance, is not that bad. And that's where I'm trying to do the math of, hey, so if we factor in, let's say that we get at market rent or maybe slightly below, we're in like a flood zone, which kind of sucks. And that is not that great on the mortgage thing. But from a rental perspective, you've got the property manager, probably 10% coming out of that. What is like a reasonable, obviously it's going to be different for everybody, but what is reasonable to think about when it comes to, is cash flowing $200 or $300 a month after a property manager worth it? Is that something, we could probably, that maybe covers a month worth of vacancy, like in between, and maybe you put away some money for repairs on a yearly basis. How are you, or how do you think about what is worthwhile of like a thing to spend your time and kind of headache on?
So I have self managed, I still self manage in Pensacola. It's doable, but it depends on how comfortable you are. Like, do you have how comfortable you are dealing with tenants, prospective tenants? Will it be difficult for you to tell them, "Hey, I'm raising the rent next year"? Some people don't like having those conversations. Some people don't want. Some people want to have someone else handle that. Some people don't want to deal with screening tenants, making sure credit check, background check, telling people no, telling people they can't have the house, even though they're like, oh, I have family, I have a kid. Like all, you get a lot of that. But you have to be. It is a business when you are running a rental property, even self managing. Like you have to think of it as like a business. So I'm not saying don't be compassionate towards people, but you can't be flexible when it comes to paying rent and stuff like that. And some people, if the tenant doesn't pay rent, and oh, they're going to get it to me by the middle of the month or whatever, and that individual lets them do that over time, the tenant will. The tenant is like training you, the landlord, that they're not going to pay on time, and making sure that you are okay with that. And that is not okay from a property management perspective. And so, if you're the type that would have difficulty starting the eviction process on the tenant, if they don't follow the terms of the lease, then I would hire property management. Now, if you're someone that enjoys it, not enjoys evicting people, but enjoys the real estate part, like that, like for me, I enjoy it. And screening tenants and like, I'm going to screen the tenants more thoroughly than a property manager probably will, because it's our house. It really depends on how much bandwidth you have, how much interest you have in it, and that if it's a nice home in a nice neighborhood, you're going to have much easier tenants to manage. That's why I still self manage the Pensacola house, because it's in a really good neighborhood. I get high quality tenants that are, knock on wood, easier to manage, and I'm saving $200+ a month, and the property manager wouldn't even be doing anything because I'm not doing that much, because the tenants take care of a lot of stuff on their own. They pay on time. Like it's easy, right? But it just depends on the house, depends on the neighborhood, depends on how much time you want to spend doing it, how much you want to learn. Do you want to pick up Brandon Turner's book on managing rental properties and read that so you know what you're
What is
doing?
that book? Plug that really quick.
It's Brandon Turner and his wife wrote a book called Managing Rental Properties. It's a yellow one. I have it across the room there, but it's a great book on self-managing. Even if someone is not planning on self-managing, it's good to learn about all that stuff. But yeah, it's really just what's your comfort level, your strength. Most people, it's your time is better spent doing podcasts, or it probably is better spent doing podcasts than like screening tenants and all that, right? It just depends like what your bandwidth is, what your interest in it is, and your, personality really. Now, most of the homes that we own, I don't self-manage. That's the only one. Most of it is property management, and I'm a big advocate for property management.
Okay. Those are that's a good list of things to think about, and some good stuff for me to personally consider and for anybody else that's in maybe a similar boat. Doug, this has been a super fun conversation. I appreciate you taking some time to break down some real estate stuff for me. What can myself or anybody listening do to be useful for you?
So I do have a free gift for your listeners. I created a short guide for investing out of state. It's called 6 Reasons to Invest Out of State. And folks can get that. The URL is outofstate.honorandequity.com. And I'm sure you can get that in the show notes.
I'll get
Honor
it
and
in there.
Equity is the platform that I started to educate folks, specifically folks in the military, about real estate. So go to that URL, put in your email, and then you can get the PDF. And I love chatting with folks about real estate. If I'm thankful my wife puts time constraints on me, because if she didn't, I would just be chatting real estate with people all day long. But thankfully she does, so that I spend more time with them. But yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn, Doug Spence, Facebook, Doug Spence. I'm on Instagram at v.dougspence. Just reach out. Love chatting with folks. Love answering real estate questions like that. Like I could talk about like your question. I could talk about that for hours. If you want to go deeper into that, let me know. We can have a phone call. But yeah,
Okay. I appreciate that, man. I will get all of the links to those in the show notes. Doug, I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
thanks. Have a good one, Brock.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.